some nights, I think about what really separates a nightmare from reality, and I realize it's often only a matter of seconds. 1 year ago, I crossed that thin line, and nothing about my life has ever felt the same since. For clarity, I should mention that I have a hearing disability. It's made me hard of hearing, and while I've adapted to it over the years, there are still moments that make me painfully aware of what I can't hear. This is one of those moments. It all started about a year ago, right after the holiday season. I had been settling back into my routine after traveling and visiting family. I live in a small suburban neighborhood on the edge of a forest in southern Quebec. The neighborhood is quiet, and most people know each other, which I prefer. It makes it feel warmer, safer, like the world isn't entirely unpredictable. During winter, I like to take my dog, Monty, on walks in the forest trails nearby. He's a Rottweiler Husky mix, loyal, energetic, and just the right companion for the outdoors. That afternoon, I had just finished a late lunch and decided to take Monty out. As soon as we turned the corner toward the forest entrance, he went ballistic, barking and tugging toward the woods. The snow had fallen fresh overnight, covering the trails in a soft, white blanket. Footprints and patches of yellow snow indicated others had passed through earlier, but since most people walk their dogs before noon, we had the trails mostly to ourselves. After about 30 minutes, we came to a fork. One path looked untouched, and my curiosity got the better of me. I knew the forest well enough to keep my bearings, so I took the new path. It led to a small clearing, perfect for birdwatching. I took out the binoculars I'd gotten for Christmas and scanned the treeline. That's when I noticed it, a blue tarp and what looked like a makeshift shelter in the distance. My first thought was curiosity, but the sun was already dipping lower, and I needed to get home. Monty ran ahead of me as usual, but something felt off. He was alert, sniffing more intensely than normal. That's when I noticed the footprints, much larger than my own. Whoever had walked here must have passed me while I was distracted with the binoculars. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was probably nothing. As darkness approached, Monty stopped abruptly and began barking violently. My heart sank when I turned and saw a man standing only a meter away. He was tall, at least 6'4", wearing charcoal snow pants and a white camo jacket. His hands were in his pockets, and he didn't move, didn't speak in a way I could understand. The dim light and my own hearing made it impossible to read his lips. I realized I had no phone with me and tried to communicate as best I could that I was hard of hearing and it was getting late. He didn't respond. By the time I got home around 4:30 p.m., it was completely dark. I went about my night routine, trying to forget the encounter. But around 3 a.m., Monty woke me, licking my hand, which he usually only does to wake me in the morning. My phone lit up with a message from a neighbor. "Is everything okay?" Monty has been barking like crazy. I ran downstairs to find Monty barking hysterically at the patio door. When a motion sensor light turned on, my blood ran cold. The man from the forest was there, staring at me through the glass. I grabbed my machete from under the bed and texted 911, my heart racing uncontrollably. Monty and I stayed in my room, guarding ourselves until the police arrived. The glass on the patio door had been smashed, but nothing was stolen. The backyard gate, which led to the forest, had been left open. Police theorized the man disappeared into the woods after the incident. I stayed with a family friend for a few days, still shaken, and I never ventured off the roads with Monty again. I didn't understand his intentions. Was he scouting the house? Just a random predator? I'll never know. Even now, I can't shake the fear that someone might have been watching me that day, waiting for the right moment. The forest had always been peaceful, but that experience made me realize just how quickly things can go wrong, and how fragile our sense of safety truly is. It was winter in Illinois, and the air had that sharp, metallic chill that always makes my nose sting. My name is Ember, and I was 16 at the time. I live with my younger sister, Kate, who's 15, and our parents. My dad works in a deforestation group about 30 minutes away, which sometimes leaves Kate and me alone for a few hours. December 5th started like any other. Kate and I decided to go to the movies to catch Terrifier 3, which had recently come out. I knew it was rated 18+, but we looked older than we were, and Honestly, teenage bravado makes you take risks you shouldn't. Halfway through the film, my phone buzzed, loud enough that it drew every eye in the theater. It was Dad. I stepped outside, tripping on the steps, and saw a text from him instead of call. "Hey, would you mind bringing me some lunch? The small cafe in the woods is shut today." I shrugged it off. Dad often asked us to do errands, and the woods by his work are secluded but beautiful. Kate and I packed some food and drove there, the forest looming ahead with its mix of dark pines and orange autumn light. The sun was already dipping below the tree-line. I called Dad to let him know we'd arrived, but there was no answer. As we walked down the trail to the lake, Dad finally texted, "Walk down the hill and wait for me at the lake." We did as instructed. That's when we saw him, or at least we thought we did. A man in black sat on the dock, back turned to us. My heart sank a little. I called out, "Dad." No response. Kate stepped closer, and I could see the unease in her eyes. I slowly approached and pulled back the hood he was wearing and realized it wasn't Dad. The man smiled, holding Dad's phone. Panic hit me like a punch to the stomach. He lunged, grabbing Kate's arm. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline surging. We tore through the snow-covered path, branches scratching our faces, feet slipping in the deep powder. I dared glance back. Stomps were behind us. He was chasing us. I didn't stop until we reached the car. I slammed the doors, locked them, and hit the gas, driving recklessly down the narrow forest road. The man crouched outside the window as I reversed, disappearing into the shadows when I sped off. We returned home, panting and terrified, to find our parents already there. Dad was furious. "My phone was stolen at work," he shouted. The police were called, and they tracked the phone's IMEI to the lake dock. That explained how the man knew where we lived and why he had crouched before we drove away. We thought it was over. 6 hours later, at 1 a.m., an unknown number texted, "I like that your house is lit only by your bedroom TV." I froze. Every muscle in my body turned to ice. Rustling outside made me look through the blinds. The man was there again, gun pointed at my window, smiling. Glass shattered as he fired, the noise deafening even for me. "Crouch!" I yelled to Kate and our parents, diving behind the bed. We called 911 immediately. Police arrived quickly, sweeping the house. Outside, an AirTag was found on our car tire. He had tracked us home. That night, I learned how fragile the world is when someone with malicious intent knows your every move. Kate and I were traumatized, but I carried an overwhelming sense of guilt as the older sister. I should have been more alert when Dad's phone didn't respond. I should have noticed the danger before it escalated. We never saw him again. But every shadow, every flicker of movement outside our window brings back that night. I've learned to trust my instincts more, to never ignore red flags, and to always be aware of my surroundings. Even today, my heart races when I remember his smile, the way he knew exactly where we were, and how easily he could have ended everything in an instant. I remember the night vividly, as if the cold wind and the crunch of snow beneath my boots were etched into my memory forever. My name is Lila. I'm 17, and I live in upstate New York, where winter isn't just a season, it's a force of nature. That night was particularly brutal. A heavy snowstorm had rolled in unexpectedly, turning the roads into icy ribbons of white and the forests into endless walls of shadow. It all started around 11:30 p.m. I had spent the evening at my friend Chloe's house, celebrating her birthday. The roads were already slick with packed snow, but I was confident driving my old Ford Ranger. I told Chloe I'd be fine, and she reluctantly waved me off, warning me to drive carefully. I promised I would. The route home was normally uneventful. A long stretch of wooded back roads, the occasional farmhouse, a few deer wandering near the tree line. But the storm had changed everything. Snow fell in thick sheets, and my windshield wipers struggled to keep up. Visibility was almost zero. I could barely see the road lines, and the glow from my headlights barely reached past 20 feet. About 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed something strange. At first, I thought it was my imagination, shadows playing tricks in the swirling snow. But then I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road ahead, completely still. I slammed on the brakes, fishtailing slightly as the tires struggled to grip the ice. The figure didn't move, and I instinctively swerved onto the shoulder, narrowly missing a ditch. When I glanced back in my rearview mirror, the figure was gone. I told myself it was just a deer, or maybe a trick of the snowstorm, but my gut screamed otherwise. I increased my grip on the steering wheel, eyes darting around. Every branch that swayed in the wind, every shadow cast by the headlights, made me flinch. I was about 10 minutes from home when the truck's engine sputtered. The old Ford had been temperamental, and in this weather, it wasn't unusual, but the timing couldn't have been worse. The truck coughed and died completely. I sat there for a moment, stunned, tried to restart it. Nothing. Panic began to creep in. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, in a blizzard with no cell reception. That's when I noticed the footprints in the snow, circling my truck. Large, heavy boots. They hadn't been there before I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I scanned the area, trying to see anything through the storm, but it was impossible. My first thought was to lock the doors, which I did immediately. The truck's interior suddenly felt like a cage, and not in a comforting way. I sat there, debating my next move, when I heard a low, deliberate scraping noise outside. Something, or someone, was moving through the snow, circling the truck. I could feel the vibrations through the metal frame, subtle but terrifying. My mind raced. Should I stay in the truck? Should I try to make a run for it? I didn't know which was worse. Then the headlights of another car appeared on the distant road. Relief washed over me. Maybe someone else was stranded too. Maybe they could help. But as the vehicle drew closer, my relief turned to horror. The car slowed, then stopped a few feet behind me. No lights, no engine sound, just presence. I tried to keep calm, whispering to myself, it's just someone else, it's just someone else. I reached for the spare key, planning to start the engine again, but before I could, a shadow appeared in the back window. I froze. The figure raised its arms slowly, pointing directly at me. I screamed, throwing the truck into reverse, tires spinning uselessly on the ice. The shadow didn't move, didn't blink. It just stood there, watching me. My heart pounded as I realized I had nowhere to go. The road was a slick, icy trap, the forest closing in on both sides. I hit the horn repeatedly, but the blizzard swallowed the sound. In a desperate move, I grabbed my phone from my pocket. No signal. My hand shook so badly, I dropped it twice before finally opening the flashlight. I flicked it on, sweeping the beam across the snow and trees. That's when I saw them. 3 figures standing just beyond the tree line, watching me. One of them held something long and black, too dark to make out in the snow. I felt the truck shudder, like someone was trying to open the door. My heart leapt into my throat. I spun the steering wheel violently, trying to get back on the main road, but the tires just dug into the snowbank. I was trapped, alone, with no help. Then, the scraping sound returned, closer, faster. I glanced behind me. One of the figures was moving along the side of the truck, coming up on the passenger door. I grabbed my backpack and yanked out my emergency knife, the one my dad insisted I carry during long drives in the winter. It felt heavy in my hands, but I clutched it anyway. The figure slammed against the passenger window. I screamed, pressing my foot on the brake, trying to make the truck lurch away. The window cracked. I could see the face now, pale, almost expressionless, eyes dark and gleaming with something I couldn't name. My stomach twisted. This was no prank, no drunk kids. These people, or whatever they were, meant harm. Instinct took over. I climbed out of the truck from the driver's side, knife in hand, and ran into the forest. The snow was deep, pulling at my boots, but I didn't care. I just ran. The wind tore my face, cutting through my jacket, but I kept going blindly, hoping to put enough distance between me and them. Branches whipped against my skin. I tripped and fell several times, snow filling my gloves and pants. Every time I glanced back, I could see them, 3 dark silhouettes gliding effortlessly over the snow, keeping pace with me. They didn't make noise. They didn't stumble. They just followed. I remembered an old cabin my parents had taken me to years ago, not far from this trail. Desperate, I aimed for it. If I could get inside, lock the doors, maybe barricade the windows, I might survive until morning. My legs burned, lungs screamed, but the silhouettes never faltered. Finally, the cabin came into view. I could see its faint outline through the snowstorm. I sprinted the last 50 feet, yanking the door open. Inside, it was dark and musty, smelling of wood and dampness. I slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. I pressed my back against the door, knife in hand, listening. Footsteps in the snow outside. They circled the cabin. They weren't hurrying. They were enjoying this. My breath came in shallow gasps as I realized how alone I truly was. Hours seemed to pass like this. The storm raged outside, footsteps occasionally breaking the monotony of the wind. I tried to stay calm, whispering to myself that morning would come, that someone would check the forest for stranded cars. But as the night deepened, I heard something worse than footsteps, a voice. It was low, almost a hiss, coming from somewhere outside the cabin. "We see you," it said, soft but deliberate. "You can't hide." I sank to the floor, pressing the knife against my chest, shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't respond. I couldn't scream. I could only listen as the storm masked their movements and the night stretched on endlessly. Eventually, I dozed off in short, terrified bursts. When I awoke, it was gray outside. The storm had passed, leaving the world covered in untouched snow except for a single trail leading from the cabin.